Hey everyone, thanks for joining us live this week on our expert interview series. This week, I've got an absolute expert in terms of physical therapy, as well as digital online platforms as well. So Maggie, I met her, I think maybe about a year and a half ago or something along those lines now, just randomly online. And we had a lot of things in common in terms of like what we thought to improve the industry and so on. We've stayed in touch for the period of time, and especially during the COVID period, to really help the industry as a entirety. So I thought it'd be awesome to bring her on, share a little bit about her story, about how she went from a practitioner owning her own business, treating people, to kind of starting to transition to creating an online platform that helps service practitioners and patients together. And she's also involved in some other really interesting tech things, which I think are really going to be great to share. So I really appreciate you jumping on the interview series this week. Thanks again. And maybe just kick it off and tell us a little bit more specifically about yourself and in sort of your background.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brad. I remember the first time we met over a coffee in downtown Toronto, pre-COVID.
Distillery. Yeah, pre-COVID.
Distillery, yeah. It was great. So like you said, I'm a physiotherapist. I graduated from McMaster University for my master's in physiotherapy in 2009. And I had initially thought I was going to go into global health and international development. My research was in that area. I had gone to Northern Ontario to do some community-based work there. I had gone to Tanzania to do a clinical placement in Mwanza, Tanzania, and came back, decided to live in Toronto, and had to get a job. Had student loans, had to pay them off, got a job in private practice, and actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and started to take a lot of courses. I've always enjoyed learning, and started to take some more continuing education courses, developing my skills as a clinician in a general orthopedic practice. And I ended up working in 5 clinics in 5 years. So I did the jump around to different clinics, trying to figure out who I was as a clinician, what I enjoyed. And I eventually landed on persistent pain as a clinician, as an area that I wanted to focus in on. And as you mentioned, I did start a business. I started my own physio practice, which was a sole proprietorship. And I was renting space from a larger clinic, just seeing how it would be if I was running it myself, and if I enjoyed it, if I enjoyed the business side. 6 months after I started my first business, my physio practice, I started Embodia with a chemical engineer. He was a chemical engineer at the time, teaching himself how to code. So he was learning how to code. I was learning how to develop a business, and we started an online platform, which is called Embodia. It was really a side project at first. I had noticed in my physio practice that, like many of us notice, our patients don't always do their exercises. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to, it's that maybe what I was teaching them was complex or brand new, and they need those reminders. So I thought there's probably a better way to give them this education and exercise prescription. So we built an app to deliver that care to my patients. That was 6 years ago, and we've grown and developed Embodia far beyond exercise prescriptions since then.
Totally. And I think it's interesting, one part that you said of like going to like kind of 5 different clinics in 5 years. And, there's sometimes is that misconception where people, think like, hey, I have to get a job and I sort of got to stay there. And, part of it is really when you're kind of starting out, you're getting a little bit of an idea of who you want to be as a practitioner, who you want to serve, who you best resonate with, and so on. So I guess I'm sort of curious on your thoughts when you were going through that process, like what, sort of what were you thinking? Was it like, hey, I want a different like niche, or I want to sort of see like a different, grouping of people? Like what was sort of going through your mind?
So it was a combination. There was several
or maybe
things
bad
happening.
management or something like that too, but
Yep. That was part of it, certainly. I certainly had a challenging experience, the first place that I worked at, and was met with some harsh realities of private practice in that it's also a business. As a physiotherapist, I wasn't trained in business, and nor did I think I had an interest in it. But in private practice, of course, there's a business aspect to it. So I was a little bit shell-shocked in my first job with just how focused they were on the business side of it. Another part of it was different clinics have different specialties and you see different populations of patients. So I was just kind of finding my way in terms of what I enjoyed and where I felt like I could be most useful and helpful to patients.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a big thing because sometimes people get stuck into the mindset where they've got to be doing something specific, and it's like, okay, well, you might have an interest in one sort of clinical discipline than the other, and sort of going out. But it sounds like you traveled a little bit across the world and were doing some different types of things in there. So did you feel like that kind of experience helped you, I guess, see things in a different light outside of just like the clinical aspect, and maybe give you more insight to starting that side sort of project originally?
I think so. I think Embodia and even my physio practice came from an accumulation of experiences. I've always loved traveling. I've done a lot of traveling and will travel again when the pandemic is over. I actually also love traveling in Canada, and it certainly provides a different perspective. And working in hospitals and private practices in different areas of the world is certainly eye-opening to different population needs, different clinician needs as well. When I was in Tanzania, the clinicians that I was working with didn't have a solid grasp on what neuroplasticity is. And this was 2009, so not that long ago. And their textbooks, their resources, even what was being used in schools to teach them were really outdated. So I think probably the seed was planted at that point. They were all using smartphones. The physiotherapists were using smartphones to be on Facebook and chat with friends, but they were using these really old textbooks to guide their practice, their clinical practice. So probably the seed was planted then, and then Embody Academy, which is for online learning, didn't come to be until 8 years later.
Totally. And when you were kind of kicking off like Embodia, what were sort of some of the thoughts? Because I know there's sometimes people, that I speak with a lot have like different ideas. They're like, hey, you know what, I would like to maybe do an online course, or I'd like to be able to facilitate my service online, or, program design or nutrition or whatever it is. So like a lot of times people kind of get stuck and not really sure where to go. So like, what were some of your initial thoughts and like when you were going into it and sort of navigating it?
Most of the time my thoughts were, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I think it's important that you say that though, because a lot of people think that like, especially with you having successful business, or I know even sometimes with myself, it's like, people say, okay, well, these people got everything sorted out. They've got like everything, but a lot of the time it's sort of, I don't really know what's going on. So, or I'm figuring it out as I go, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was really scary, and it is still scary because there's so many unknowns. There's certainly a risk of failure. There's a risk of feeling like you look foolish, or being too concerned about what other people think. But I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to try starting something that was using my physiotherapy skills, but not direct patient care. And I was also very fortunate to have met Ellie, who's my business partner, who was so motivated as well to build a business, him doing the technical side as he was learning how to code, but also just kind of being there as a partner to push each other forwards, even when we both felt like we didn't quite know what we were doing.
Totally. And I know it's, it started to pick up and that kind of stuff. And, as that online platform started to grow, what was sort of the evolution? Like, like getting the first like 100 members to like the first 1,000 and so on? Like what was kind of that process?
It was very slow for us at first. Even through the first couple of years, we started as a home exercise prescription and patient education app for therapists to prescribe exercises. And really what we were competing with was drawing stick figures. You can't really prescribe exercises digitally faster than you can draw a stick figure unless you count writing out all the instructions. So people just felt like there was certainly a mindset of clinicians thinking, well, it's up to the patient to take the notes themselves or like to interpret my stick figure drawings, and that's good enough, to now really clinicians accepting that this is part of our role to be able to prescribe videos or other engaging ways of providing our patients with education between their sessions. But the first couple of years were pretty slow, and I attribute that in part to us learning how to develop a business, develop a tech business, and learn how to build a product that's really easy to use. We're in a two-sided marketplace. That's part of our business, which just means we actually have three sides, but we have clinicians use it, patients use it, and we have continuing education instructors, and figuring out how to build the platform to service all of those different user types and make it easy for them and an enjoyable experience took us several years to figure out. COVID was a huge catalyst for our growth because clinics closed. They didn't have many other options in terms of how they connect with their patients. Plus, we added a tele-rehab component for clinics, and clinicians wanted to continue to learn, couldn't go to in-person courses, and decided to take online courses.
Totally. And I think it's important to like underscore that too. A lot of, you were obviously working on this business, you were treating as well, right? So, it's not something that was just built overnight. And I think that that's a big component to like success is really, sticking with it. So like, what are some things that made you really, push forward as you, were working another business, treating people and so on, and then, trying to get this kind of thing off the ground and sort of fighting those stick figures, so to speak? Like, what was that? Like, how'd you push through those times?
Well, one of the first things that we did was we got a mentor who was in the technology space. She's not even in healthcare, and she's still a close mentor of mine and is just like a phone call away. So at first, we connected with her. She gave us some advice. And actually, one of the first pieces of advice she gave us and questions she asked us was, do you really want to do this? It's going to be far harder than you think it's going to be. And you're going to have to be tenacious through the process. So are you sure? Like, don't answer right now. Think about this for the next week and really think, is this what I want to do with my life for the next 5 to 10 years?
What did you think about that when she says that, though? Because I tell people the same thing sometimes. It's like, listen, like, are you committed to that, right? From a mindset perspective, like, what did you think? Were you in on it, or did you kind of?
I thought, yeah, I know it's going to be hard and I can totally do this. And then when we first hit our first couple of big roadblocks, I still think about it now, actually. When we hit a roadblock, it's her advice to me is still in my mind. And that's part of what actually gets me through, because I said, no, I'm committed. I'm going to do this. I know I have to be tenacious. So this is just a moment where I need to push through. But at first I was blindly optimistic.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot when we kind of get into business and whatnot. And what are some like kind of roadblocks that you hit, and like, how did you navigate through them?
How long do we have? I'll try to pick out some of the top roadblocks.
Yeah, I would say like maybe pick out like the top ones that were like really critical times. So I know like there was a couple, like I had a practice when I was in Toronto, and I had to make a decision where I was traveling with like NFL and NHL, and being able to like take my patient base and kind of like literally give it to my other practitioners. And then I've sort of like started and opened other clinics. There's kind of other times when I've had like, those really critical times? Was like there ever a time where you were just sort of like, oh man, this is not worth it anymore, or something like that? And you're like, okay, well, I got to get through this.
Yes, certainly. There's a few big moments for us in our business, and I'll be completely honest with you. Part of our story actually is that my business partner is my ex-boyfriend, and we broke up while we were building the business in the first couple of years. So It was a moment when we had several conversations that, are we going to continue to do this together, even though we've broken up? We were living together, building this business together, and decided to break up. And that was certainly a roadblock, to say the least, of continuing on this journey. Now, thankfully, it wasn't like anything terrible happened in the breakup, and he's still one of my best friends, and we trust each other, which is maybe a silver lining of what came out of it, because we know each other so well, we trust each other. So we're actually, as it turns out, better business partners than we were life partners. Second roadblock came up when we made our first hire, and it didn't go so well. And I really started to doubt my skills, because I wasn't able to work with somebody, or I felt like I wasn't able to develop that person into the employee that we needed. And whether or not I would be able to do that in the future, or if I just was incapable of hiring somebody to help us, or I didn't have that skill as a leader. And the final one I would say is really, again, a bit of a personal roadblock. I'm an introvert, and I'm a sensitive introvert. So getting feedback when somebody doesn't like your product, or when somebody doesn't like the way it works, or doesn't agree with the way that you built something. And certainly we've received lots of emails and comments over the years. Even in my first presentation that I ever did, there was lots of people in the room who thought this was a terrible idea. So being able to kind of grow tougher skin and be able to take that was something that I wasn't sure that I would be able to do, as well as to grow the confidence to be able to present, since I am the one in the business who needs to be doing the presentations and public speaking and so on. That doesn't come naturally to me.
Yeah, I totally relate. I feel like I'm a bit of an introvert myself to some level, and it's like, I think that's important, is to really like highlight those issues, but you also like understand that and are focused on overcoming that and improving, right? And I guess like a big sort of underlying thing is like kind of getting comfortable being uncomfortable and pushing yourself to develop other skill sets that you might not be as strong or might not be as comfortable with, but over time they're really going to be crucial for you to having success in getting to wherever your specific goals are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everything can be developed. It may not come naturally to you, and you may not ever be have an A+ level skill level in whatever. For me, probably public speaking is never going to be something that I can do really naturally, and as well as other people, but certainly I can develop it to a level that's quite good and acceptable.
Yeah, and it's like good enough is good enough to some capacity, or like in some regards, I guess like outsourcing would also probably be potential, maybe not like on presentations, like your specific scenario, but like, is there things that you can, sort of outsource? And I know like, as you're growing your business, there's probably a lot of things that like you found someone who can do coding and help support you in other ways. And I think that's important to know, like when your skill sets are kind of good enough is good enough. And then also where you need to delegate to someone else that could end up helping you get, sort of exponential growth. And I know you mentioned like getting a mentor, I know there's some other people that you work with as well that kind of up level you. And I think that that's like a really important aspect as you're growing your business. Personal development, business development is like, surrounding yourself with the right people who can up level you, and also outsourcing or delegating things out that people could either do better or, more efficiently, or you just don't like doing them or whatever. So I guess like, what are your thoughts on that as you, sort of go through where you were to where you are today?
Yes, certainly. So understanding what your strengths and your weaknesses are, playing to your strengths, and developing or filling the gaps, whether that means delegating, outsourcing, or developing your own skills to support your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses, but not focusing on them, right? So I've developed and have worked on some of my weaknesses to a point where it's good enough, but then focusing on what I'm really good at. Certainly we've hired, and thankfully I've learned how to hire well in our business, and delegating to those team members. Something that I'm learning to do right now is to really delegate and not micromanage. Trust the people on your team, trust that they're going to do a good job. And part of that has been creating a really good onboarding, besides hiring well, but also then creating a really good onboarding program so that they know how the business works, what their job is, what their role is, what their mission is.
Totally. And I'm happy you brought that up, because it was, I think that's a huge part. And like hiring, I kind of say, like, once you get your business to a certain level, hiring is really like the key component. And it was for me, and it was definitely a huge challenge to being able to get to that next level. But having the onboarding, having the systems to help support that is really huge. So anything you're doing in your business is obviously like creating some systems around it. And obviously, making sure that people know specifically what their KPIs or their goals are. But I would imagine, like, even with, Embody itself, like, there's certain procedures or systems that need to work in order to, for the entire platform to run and so on, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is an ongoing process, I think, and it probably will be forever. It just never feels like it's quite done. But the systems and processes that we use are an incredibly important component to the Embody platform and to our team. And developing the culture of the team as well is something that's been new as we've hired. And we're also a remote team. We're actually in 5 different countries, as it turns out, our team. So we're working across different time zones, different countries, and all remote. So developing that culture on the team has been also very important.
What are some keys that you've learned in terms of like the cultural component to really getting everyone tight knit and close together?
So one of the first things that we do when somebody starts with us is they get an onboarding document. And part of that kind of package is an introduction, just a very brief introduction, like 1 or 2 sentences to each team member. And the new hire is to set up a one-on-one with each of the team members and just have a casual conversation. We do have regular team meetings, but then we also have team socials. We do a short social just on Slack, actually, on Fridays. And once a month, we do a team social together. That used to be in person, and we'd have like dinner or lunch or something together. But that's been switched to a virtual team gathering. And it's actually gone extremely well. This was a recommendation from our team to me in one of our quarterly reviews. So we do a quarterly review as a team, and hands down, the thing that everybody voted for was more team socials, which, as the leader of the company, I didn't really think that's what people wanted to be doing with their spare time, but, you don't know what you don't know. So asking our team what they actually wanted was very insightful. So we've started to do monthly team socials together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you never know, I guess, right? So that's one thing, is always getting feedback. I think sometimes as business owners, we kind of almost distance ourselves, and it's like, hey, I'm the business owner, here's the staff. And it's like the line drawn, instead of, asking like, hey, what's going on? What could we do better and whatnot? One question I've always asked is like, what are the hidden opportunities in the business? Like, where do you think we could improve, or how could we improve? And I like to always ask that question in like, kind of weekly check-ins and so on, to get some feedback in terms of like, getting more specifics of like what they actually feel that they need. So love it. So I'd love to like chat a little bit more about the Embody platform itself, because I think it's a really good system and platform to help support patients, help support practitioners, and ultimately create a better experience. Now, there's a lot of other episodes and you'll hear me talking about the patient experience. And I think anything that we could have that creates a better experience for the patient, that allows them to, motivate them, is going to get them to get better results. You're going to retain the patients. It's going to be able to help you, really build a better business. And ultimately you're helping people, making a bigger impact. So maybe break it in to the phases and sort of like chat about each one. Cause I know that you've got the home exercise programs, like the messaging options and sort of like the tele-rehab, like you kind of got all of that kind of aspect onto there. And then you've got, the academy where people can end up, doing the continuing education and so on. So I'd love for you to kind of like share a little bit more specifics and kind of how it can improve retention for patients and a better overall experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, there's so many shifts that are happening in healthcare right now, and physiotherapy and chiropractic practices are not immune to it. And these are like seismic shifts that are happening now and are going to continue to occur. They were going to happen probably slower than what they are currently occurring at due to COVID. I think when we look back in 5 or 10 years, we're going to really think like, wow, this was such a pivotal moment in healthcare, and how we adapted our practices really led to our success. I hope we say success as a profession.
Evolution.
An evolution, yes. One of these shifts that has been occurring is that patients are consumers, right? People go online. We already know that. People come into our practices and have Googled everything about their symptoms and condition, and what they expect is also different. And this is going to continue to change. People use online programs already on their own, and there are more that are coming that are going to also be funded by insurance companies, which may be a threat to our profession. In part because online programs, or let's just say digital only physiotherapy, so following digital physiotherapy on an app that's driven by artificial intelligence, is currently being shown to be as effective as gold standard physiotherapy care. So machine physiotherapy, where somebody's following an app, and gold standard physiotherapy in RCTs are showing same results. In order to compete in this changing market, we have to provide patients or consumers with some form of a digital experience. I don't think there's going to be any way around it, at least for those who are seeing a volume of patients who are covered under insurance. So Embodia is one option. There's certainly other options. Now, of course, I'm biased because Embodia is my platform, but one of the components to Embodia is home exercise prescription that is prescribed by the clinician. Okay? So it's not machine driven, meaning it's not just a machine picking out the programs for patients, but it's driven by the clinician, prescribed by the clinician to the patient, giving the patient also the opportunity to track their progress, symptom levels, other outcome measures over time, and clinicians have a dashboard to see that progress. There's also two-way messaging, so patients can securely and privately message you. They can take notes on their program, and you can see those notes. We added the tele-rehab component so that clinics and clinicians can see patients virtually. And there's an online education platform for healthcare providers. Currently, we have just over 900 online courses that are static, take on your own time and pace. And then we also run live online sessions with over 300 continuing education instructors around the world. So one of the values to me in online education is that you can learn from anybody around the world, and you have the opportunity probably to learn from others that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so otherwise. It's also a cost-effective method of learning instead of traveling, taking courses, taking time off of work.
Yeah, totally. Love it. And I think like that's one big thing. It's like having a way to actually support. And I think that kind of what I said in the beginning, it's that there's kind of that evolution. And I feel like COVID really increased exponentially the adaptation to technology. There was a lot of people who would say, never doing therapy online. I remember in the beginning stages, like literally almost a year ago now, patients would say, no, I'm not interested in virtual, whatever, thanks though. But after 3 months of being locked down, they're kind of like, okay, well, I'm open to it. So it's sort of, I'm seeing the trends of more people going virtually, more people looking for more as well. And it's almost starting to get to the standard where people want a bit more of a niche or all-in-one service. And they're kind of moving away in some regard from the sort of like PT mill-based work where they're not really getting as much service. It's kind of like um, it's kind of like really it's like a service. It's not really like an actual experience and sort of focused on them. So creating that custom experience and being able to help them be more invested in their actual rehab or prehab or whatever it is, I think is a really, really big aspect. And positioning your business to make sure that you can accommodate those things and stay on top of new trends is obviously going to be a super huge important part. What do you think on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as always, there's the early adopters from both patients and practitioners, and we're hitting kind of that middle of the bell curve where we're gaining momentum in terms of traction for virtual options, which includes telerehab, digital exercise prescription, as well as other models, which I think are going to evolve going to come to light and evolve very, very soon in the next couple of years, which clinicians I think should be excited for. We can't change, or we can't resist the change, I think. And that's something that a lot of clinicians have told me through COVID. They were a little bit resistant to change. The way that things were being done before were working. And that's fair. The pain point wasn't big enough until COVID happened. We couldn't see patients in person, and vice versa for patients. They just didn't know any other way, but it's become clear that virtual care is a very effective way to provide care to patients.
Totally. And I always sort of say it's better than like them doing nothing realistically, because that's kind of like the other option in some regard, right? And I know you're involved in like the technology space for healthcare as well, and you've got like kind of another project added on to this as well. So I'd love to like kind of talk a little bit more about that, because I know we kind of chatted a little bit before of just like new things that are coming out and how the healthcare industry is evolving, and sort of maybe getting some of your insight into you think things that will change over the coming years, and like what new kind of things are coming out and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to get more insight in terms of that. So maybe start off just by telling us a little bit about that project, and then some of your predictions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the community director of TechToHealth, and TechTO is the Tech Toronto organization, which was started as an events company, in-person events company for Tech Toronto founders. And then they started to branch out into different verticals. So there's TechToHealth, which I'm in charge of, TechTO Travel, TechTO Marketing, there's sales, and so on. So lots of different verticals. And basically we have conversations about the emerging trends in those industries. It used to be in-person events, and we'd have about 300 to 500 people at each of our events. Lots of fun, food, drinks, networking, and talks from industry leaders. Now we've moved it to an online format, of course. And so it's BYOB now, and bring your own food, but we still have great talks from industry leaders who are talking about the emerging trends. And these leaders are typically either in the healthcare organization, like the healthcare system, hospitals and home care, so on, and on the technology side. And really our mission is to have half of the room as technologists and half of the room as healthcare practitioners and organizations, so that it's a meaningful conversation about the future of healthcare. It is a really important component in health tech that it is being built not just for, but with those who are going to use it, right? So the technology itself should have either a clinician and ideally a patient on the board or on the founding team of the technology company. And TechToHealth brings everybody together to have lots of great conversations. The most common trends that have been talked about at these events are changes in the insurance industry, apps wearables, robotics, and a huge topic is artificial intelligence.
Cool. And I guess like the AI stuff seems to be like coming up quite a bit. And what sort of things are you seeing trend wise? Like I've seen a lot of like, it's interesting on like how, some of the AI can be programmed and you can start to get like the specifics, the outcomes from the treatments and that kind of stuff. So yeah, what are some of the things that you found most interesting from the AI perspective?
So one of the things that AI is going to do is democratize healthcare. People are going to be able to get really good healthcare information and be in charge of their own healthcare. So there's going to be a direct-to-consumer portion of it, and then there's going to be a B2B, like companies selling to businesses or clinicians and hospitals. One of the kind of Canadian darling companies at the moment is Maple, which is kind of on-demand doctors. They have an AI component that's being built out, but I can't speak too much of it because I don't know where they're at with it. In today's news, actually, Inkblot, which is a mental health platform, which also has an AI component, was just purchased by Green Shield. So two of those trends kind of colliding: insurance and AI and health tech. And I think we're going to see more of that. Certainly, like TELUS Health is out there buying up companies. There's a few big players that are going out and buying lots of technology companies.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of positive because I'm familiar with like the Get Maple or whatever it's called, and it's like, it saves people. I think it really helps two things. It's like people can advocate more for their health, but they can also eliminate a lot of the problems because people can get access easier, and instead of like having to put a resistance or friction in, actually kind of getting the treatment or whatever that they need specifically, right? So yeah. I think that it, COVID even helped expedite that process. I know a lot of clinics closed, and now all of a sudden it's sort of like, I can actually help more people. It helps, them, it helps the practitioner, it helps like overhead and everything else. So I sort of see a lot kind of shifting towards that online platform, more specifically from that sort of implementation of like doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally. In terms of like, with Embodia, like what are some things that you're focusing on doing for the future? I know you got like pretty in-depth platform now, but like where do you sort of see shifting, and what are you kind of have from a goal standpoint there?
So we just released a few new things on Embodia, and then we have one other part of the platform that will be released this year. What we most recently put out was something called Private Academies, and we're pretty excited about it. We've seen some initial and early success with it with large clinics. So this is really for the big clinics. We also have Altum Health, which is part of the UHN, who's using it. Kids Physio Group is using it. Pivot Sports Medicine, Dinah Hampson is using it. And it's to train internally staff. So onboarding, in-services, any kind of staff education can all be done on the platform and privately, giving also the owners or the admins of the platform useful insights. The second academy that we released is Clinic Academies, which allows clinicians and clinics to sell their courses to the general public. Because it's under the Embodia umbrella, what's particularly exciting about it is the ability for their courses to be found on Google, because there's a lot of information out there. But if you're a clinician, and likely you're a clinician with a lot of knowledge, there's different ways of packaging that and providing that to patients. One is through home exercise prescription, but another is through online courses that are provided to the general public. So we've now have a platform that does that. Courses. It can actually be both. It can be on demand and live. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's cool. Super cool. Love it. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty exciting. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you like coming on and, sharing some of your insights and obviously, the positive and the negatives. And I think it's important for people to really understand that like not everything is going to be this amazing path upwards, and that there's going to be times that are hard. And, you've got to really stick to the overall vision of what you want to be able to create. And, you can have lots of success, but it's going to take a lot of like tenacity, as you said, and consistency in pushing through things. And I really appreciate like you being on that cutting edge of technology and providing a service that creates better experiences for the patient, so that ultimately you can really get a bigger impact, because that's what we want to be as practitioners. It's not just write down something on a piece of paper. Well, they didn't do their exercises, or they didn't, I didn't follow up with them, or whatever it was. We want to, it's part of our responsibility. I sort of see that it's our fundamental obligation to do what we can in our power and create a really good experience, and also help support them in every way that possible, because they've got a lot of other things going on in their lives. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your personal story, but also, telling people like you definitely can, do other things. You don't have to be the practitioner working at one place. Like you can go to other places, you can travel the world, and you can solve these other problems. And if you got that consistency and tenacity, you're going to be able to stick through and ultimately grow your business. So I appreciate you coming on. For people to like learn a little bit more about you or Embodia and so on, like where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram personally at Maggie B PT, and so is Embodia at Embodia. You can go to our website if you'd like, which is embodiaapp.com, and feel free to send us a message. Embodia is also on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can go there as well. Personally, my favorite social media platform, which I know is not the most popular choice, is LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect with me, definitely send me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. I check my messages there as well.
Cool. I'll make sure I'll post everything below. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing everything. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
Say if you're somebody who has an idea and you really want to do it, or even just give it a try, then do it. There's no other way around it. You can think about it all you want. You can think about it for years, but you'll never know if you can do it. And to me, success and failure is the same thing. It's just along the same line at different ends of the spectrum. And typically, everybody fails. So don't be afraid of it. It's a great thing to go out and give it a try, learn the lessons. And if I can help or be helpful in any way, then please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. I always say it's like success and failure are really just feedback. So, the more that you get feedback, the better you can kind of progress. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Brad.